episode on the Mindful Living podcast with your host, Sana. And today, in this episode, we're diving into a topic which is often misunderstood, but it is so vital to our overall well being. Listeners, it is post concussion syndrome. And we'll be also talking about how brain injuries can affect not only your health, but your quality of life. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you or someone you love ever had a concussion and they felt off long after? Or maybe you are simply curious about how brain health ties into wellness and resilience? Then, to help me answer these questions, I have Nate Pope. He is a neurological occupational therapist and co founder of the NCX Brain Recovery. With over 2 decades of pioneering experience, Nate is here to demystify the world of concussions and brain recovery, offering insights that could literally change lives. And listeners, this episode is just only for those affected by head injuries. It's for anyone who wants to understand the power of brain, how to protect it, and how to nurture it for long lasting wellness. So let's get quickly started. And with that, Nate, welcome to the show. And it is an honor to have you with us.
Thanks, Sana. It's good to be here.
Okay. So, Nate, of course, for those who might be unfamiliar, including me, I'll be very honest. Can you explain what exactly is post-concussion syndrome and how it differs from the typical recovery we normally expect after a concussion?
Sure. Well, a lot of people have hit their heads and had concussions, or not been sure if they did or didn't. But usually when you have a concussion, you have some symptoms and someone tells you you've had a concussion and you know it. But those symptoms usually go away after a few days to a few weeks. And so the difference with post-concussion syndrome is, first of all, when you have those symptoms right after a concussion for a few days to a few weeks, those symptoms are related to an imbalance in the brain. Some parts of the brain, as perhaps a protective response, go less active and get less blood, and other areas immediately recognize that they need to take over and help out, and they go overactive and start getting more blood than they're supposed to get. And there's an imbalance in activity level with the brain. But in most concussions or minor head injuries, that just resets on its own without any therapy usually. And in a few days to a few weeks, you're back to normal. When you start worrying and when it becomes post-concussion syndrome is when you're 4 weeks, between 3 and 4 weeks, or longer, and the symptoms have not reset. At that point, what's happened in your brain is that for whatever reason, and we don't understand exactly why, but the parts that have disengaged and gone less active have remained so, and they've remained inactive, and other parts are having to take over those functions, and they're not designed to do that. And so it's nice that our brain can compensate and deal with an urgent situation, but it's not nice if it's long term, because those areas of the brain are not designed to compensate for those other areas. They're not designed to do those tasks. And so it leaves you with the symptoms. And because the brain eventually has, after about a month, it decides this is the new normal. This is a habit now. And the brain likes to settle into a pattern or habit. It's a creature of habit, really. And so once it is in that habit, it decides to just stick with that pattern. And so that's post-concussion syndrome, essentially, is you have parts of your brain underperforming, not as active as they should be, other parts that are overworking and taking over and compensating, And for whatever reason, in your case, which is about 20 to 30% of concussions, by the way, it has not reset and gone back to normal. And it's decided that this is the new norm. And now it is a really extremely difficult habit to break. And so those people with post-concussion syndrome, they're the people who, everyone knows someone who hit their head and their symptoms they've had headaches, they've had brain fog, they've had focus issues, balance issues, the list goes on, and those symptoms never got better. Those people are living in post-concussion syndrome, and a little bit of therapy here and there has not been able to fix it. So the traditional approaches are ineffective, but the really happy news is that there is a method that does reset the brain. It's just got to be a lot more intense. And I can talk about that later if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes. I think first of all, um, you know, the fact that brain, even after something as mild, not that um, grave as concussion, it can face you know challenges which are kind of long lasting in there. And is it like very common, Nate, that people dismiss these symptoms, as you mentioned about brain fog, thinking that they'll just go away with the time, or is it something that they don't even realize, their body doesn't even realizes?
Yes. Yes. Well, many times they'll look up specific symptoms and start looking for what could cause that symptom. And unfortunately, a lot of things can cause brain fog, or a lot of things can cause headaches. And so they can start saying, oh, maybe it's this or it's that. The thing that should help people is to think about if they've had a head injury or concussion any time in the very recent past, and if those symptoms started after that. If they did, there's a pretty good chance they're connected. And um, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I'm just extra tired, or I have I'm just feeling down, a little depression or anxiety, um, and my vision is a little blurry, but maybe it's just my eyes, and so they start dismissing those symptoms because for whatever reason, we have not been taught in our society that um, when you hit your head and have a concussion, that those symptoms can persist. And a lot of people have had um, brain scans when those symptoms did persist. And unfortunately, a functional or a regular MRI will show that the brain is totally fine. And so then that also makes them think of other things that could be causing it. Because post-concussion syndrome will not show up on an MRI. Your brain looks totally healthy on an MRI because it is healthy brain tissue that is in a bad habit of working the wrong way. So the wrong parts are engaged at the wrong times, and you have some underworking areas and some overworking areas, but that stuff will not show up on an MRI. So that also can mislead a lot of people into going a lot of different directions. Many people who come to us have been to mental health professionals because they have anxiety or depression or ADHD or, irritability or a lot of those things. Other people have been to clinics to help them with the sleep patterns that have been disrupted. And others are going for headache, pain, and trying to figure that out. And others are going to vision specialists because of their blurry vision. And the list goes on, or physical therapists for balance, dizziness. And what they don't realize is that it's all the same thing. It's from their head injury, and they just need to take the right approach. That's more of a whole brain approach to get this back on track.
That is really surprising that MRI cannot detect it. And secondly, I think there's a lot of misinterpretation of although the skull is like protecting the brain, and it's like very hard, and it cannot brain cannot be harmed with something as mild as a concussion. But this is something really, really surprising, yet I think very, very important, because looks like these changes or symptoms can really long lasting, and they can have really detrimental effects. So with that, Nate, let's talk about uh, what exactly can be done. So uh, you mentioned about a process which can be time taking. Um, Really, I think could be taxing. But anyway, if you can share what exactly can be done in this particular scenario for post-concussion syndrome.
Sure. Well, this is my favorite part because there is a lot of hope now. We have learned since the technology has improved, and they have what's called functional MRIs, which are more of a video of the brain than a snapshot of the brain. Um, you can see if you have the right software and the right uh, system that can interpret the data accurately, you can use a functional MRI to detect that certain areas are not getting the kind of blood flow they ought to get during certain cognitive tests, because you're actually going through cognitive challenges while getting scanned with a functional MRI. And they can see other areas that are overactive and engaged and probably compensating for the areas that are not getting as much blood. They're getting more blood than you would ever normally see for
Mhm.
that particular task. And so we've been able to learn through that research, and it's pretty cutting edge research that it hasn't been out there for a long time. Um, we've learned that a more intense approach is effective at changing the blood flow pattern to those brain areas. In other words, you can influence and get those areas that are getting less blood to start getting more blood again. And the other areas that are over engaged, getting too much, they will start disengaging and get less blood, and you can restore that balance. Um, but what happens is if you go for 1 hour or 2 or 3 hours in a week for therapy, is the brain is in the habit of overworking certain areas to compensate for others, and it's going to
Mhm.
keep doing that. And so for your 2 or 3 hours of therapy, it will just do that harder. uh, it will just
Oh.
overwork those areas that it's habitually overworking. It'll just,
Mhm.
that's its go-to, you know? And so you're just strengthening a compensatory pattern. You're not fixing or re-engaging the less active areas. But when you do many hours in a row, many days in a row, and
Mhm.
when your approach is a kind of therapy that makes multiple areas of your brain engage simultaneously, it's very difficult for the brain to continue in that bad compensatory pattern, because now all of those areas of the brain that you're engaging have to figure out how to be engaged at the same time and to integrate together and work together. And when you do many hours in a row, many days in a row, for example, in our clinic, most patients do a 2 week program where they come in Monday and they go for 7 hours in the clinic. It's basically 6 hours a day of therapy with an hour lunch break in the middle. So it's 6 hours a day, Monday through Friday, with a weekend break, and then Monday through Friday again, 6 hours a day. So you're essentially doing 60 hours worth of therapy in 2 weeks. And that's a lot of intense therapy. And everything that we do, you're having to challenge multiple areas of your brain at the same time. So you're not going to one therapy that will target, let's say if you go to vision therapy, they would target vision stuff,
Mhm.
or speech therapy. They're going to target your speech and verbal and auditory stuff. If you go to physical therapy, it's going to be balance and strength and those kinds of things. You need to be working all of those systems simultaneously if you want the brain to integrate those systems. And if you want to activate something that has been inactive for a little while. it breaks those bad habits. And so we'll have people standing on a balance ball called a Bosu ball. And they are catching balls, so they're visually having to track, maybe cross their body, catch on the left side of their body with their right hand, and vice versa, while they're engaged in verbal conversation, thought-provoking conversation, or word games. So they're really working their visual processing, their verbal auditory processing, and their balance and body movement processing, all at the same time. And that seems to be the secret to making an imbalanced brain balanced again. We can restore balance and we can reconnect neural pathways that have, just been disrupted, but they're not damaged. And the awesome news about it is you can have a restoration of the neural pathways, which ultimately leads to a restoring the quality of life that you've lost.
And yeah, that is quite intense. I mean, 60 hours of therapy in 2 weeks. So, um, that must be daunting in the beginning. So, how do you prepare, the let's just call them, people who are coming here, and they may be not be expecting such an intense schedule, 60 hours, and that too in 2 weeks. I mean, because it definitely needs a lot of a lot of a strong mindset in there.
Yes, for sure. We talk to them. Now, you have to remember a lot of them have had symptoms for months and years. And when they realize there's a reason, and when we help them validate what they're going through, that, what, there's a reason you have these symptoms, and it's connected to your head injury, and it can go away. There is a remedial approach. In other words, there's a fix-it approach out there. Most of these patients have already gone so many places, and they're mostly focused on deal with it approaches. And people don't want to settle for deal with it approaches. So there is actually a pretty high level of motivation when people come in and realize, do you mean I can really get better? I can recover from this. And so when they realize they can recover, I explained to them, I wish there was a different way to just do it a little bit here and a little bit there. But really your brain, it's in a habit, and to break a habit, you can't do it just a little bit here and there. We're going to have to do many hours in a row, many days in a row. You're going to feel like you're living with us at the clinic for a couple of weeks, and sometimes it's 1 week if it's less, the severity's less. But we also do an 8-week aftercare program because it's important to have a home program that we design for whatever's left over. If you're not 100% recovered, let's say you're 70%, that 30% is still important to that individual and to us. And we want to help them have a program to target the things that are still possibly inactive, causing some remaining symptoms that we want to continue to resolve. And so we like to follow our patients too. You come for 2 weeks of intense therapy. That's kind of like flipping switches in the brain and making quick connections and really having a lot of progress in a 2-week period. That's why we love what we do, is they make so much progress between that first Monday and that last Friday is very fun to see how much they gain in terms of ability and also symptom reduction. But then we want to follow them at that point. 8 weeks of aftercare starts. And that's where they go home, they go back to work or school or their life, but they have activities they do every day that are specifically designed to help them with any remaining symptoms, and certainly to help them maintain what they've already gained during the 2 weeks they were with us. And so we've really enjoyed working with patients, and have found that most patients are, even after the first few days to the first week, they are very happy and seeing results, seeing that the changes occur. So their motivation um, is there to come because of the hope that they will heal, but it only improves as they start seeing symptoms one at a time, get it better and better. And so we haven't had too big of a problem. We realize people have a hard time pushing pause on their life. Oh, I gotta stop going to work for 2 weeks or school, and it's a little bit of a commitment, but
Mm-hmm.
brains do not heal the same way as other body parts. They require many hours in a row, many days in a row because they are creatures of habit. And the brain really likes to do what it's used to doing. So we have to change what it's used to doing when it's in a bad pattern.
Mm. And that's where, I just want to put up a bit of a contradictory perspective here. That and all this holistic wellness, there is a growing belief that the brain is so adaptable that it can heal itself fully without any intervention. Nate, does this belief hold any truth, or would it be misleading?
Well, I really like the idea that the brain, neuroplasticity is the term to describe the adaptability, the flexibility, the recover ability that the brain has.
Yeah.
And it naturally wants to heal. But
Mm.
I will say, when I've worked with patients that have hit their head, had multiple concussions maybe, and they've been in post-concussion, when they come and they talk about how they've had these symptoms for the last 10, 15, 20 plus years, and they have gone through the list of all of the things they have tried to do to help themselves heal. Um, it to me, it's just a definite evidence that sometimes we have to do the right things for the brain. We have to help the brain out, and the approach does matter. And if you, for example, go to all of these therapies and you have like a compensating brain, parts that are really overworking, trying to take over for the areas not doing their job, what happens is your tendency is to compensate harder and harder if those inactive areas don't activate. And what they've shown with functional MRIs going through this type of intense therapy is that it is night and day difference when you see the scan on Monday and the scan on the last Friday. All of the areas that were getting way less blood flow than they should get. This is based like on a bell curve model where their percentage of how much blood they're getting is way lower than it should be for that task. And other areas getting way more. When you look at the difference on the last Friday, those areas
Mhm.
are up in the average normal range usually, and their symptoms follow. So they don't need the scan to know that they've improved because they just feel that the symptoms are better, and they know that whatever happened, I feel more like myself. One of the most common things we hear all the time is, I feel like myself again. Like I have not been myself for years, and now I feel like myself, and I don't have a headache, and I haven't had that relief for years. I can sleep again. And so on and so forth. Um,
Mm.
but it's to me that's evidence that yes, the brain wants to heal. It has a
Right.
tendency to heal itself, but it needs help to do so. You not only do you need to, make good choices like eating right, exercising, getting sleep. We know all of those things are positive choices that if you don't make, your brain, even if it wants to heal, will have a harder time. This is one of those things that you add to that list. If you have brain injury, you need sleep, you need good nutrition, et cetera, et cetera. You also need the right kind of a therapy approach if you want to help your brain help itself.
Yeah. That is brilliantly put, made. And for someone listening to this conversation who suspects they or a loved one they have might have post-concussion syndrome, but they haven't been diagnosed yet, or they feel dismissed by healthcare providers, what steps you suggest they can take, Nate?
Yeah, sure. Well, we would love to, and we've decided to provide a free service for anyone who finds themselves struggling with post-concussion syndrome or suspect that they may have post-concussion syndrome. So the free service we offer is they can just call us. Um, they can look us up on our website, NCX Brain Recovery.com, and just call the phone number and talk to a real person, set up a time, talk to a real person face to face. Usually, when I say face to face, I mean virtually. Usually, we work with people all over the country, all over the United States, and so a lot of that obviously is virtually that we meet with people. But they can tell us all of their history of how they hit their head and the symptoms that came after, and we go into the details of what symptoms they are and the severity of each one of them. And that helps us really make a better guess as to whether this is likely post-concussion syndrome or not. And if we feel like it is, then we can talk about how we could help them at the clinic. And for those who that's not possible for, we talk about other options and what things they can do, what activities they could do, what things they could help themselves with. Um, Most of them will um, benefit the most, of course. And if they really want a recovery, they probably need to have someone help them through that. It's very difficult to do 6 hours a day for many days in a row when you don't know exactly what you're doing. So, um, yeah. So they can just call us. We can walk them through it and we can give them the best options for what they're able to do based on their circumstances.
That is really, really empowering. I really appreciate, Nate, that you are empowering listeners to advocate for themselves, because with invisible injuries, I think it can be so obvious to feel lost in the system and kind of have that confusion. So that is really, really empowering. And also, at a very generic level, I mean, it's a very generic question, but I believe it's a very important question. Um, Irrespective of, whether it's a concussion or not, what are a few tips you would recommend for maintaining and optimizing brain health? Because right now, with so much exposure to um, technology, and then not getting exposed to natural light, I mean, there are so many discussions happening around the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe. What tips you would provide?
Yeah, no, I love that question. And it is very important because all of us to some degree um, need to pay attention, or it would be good for us to pay attention to our mental health and balance in general. That's a good quality life usually coincides with good mental health and having that balance. And so, from a neurological occupational therapist perspective, and from our brain clinic, we have found a lot of the activities we give patients for aftercare. This is for continued uh, um, healthy brain. Um, we try to help them make lifestyle choices like pick activities where your brain is engaged, having to engage and integrate multiple systems at the same time. So if you go for a hike outside, getting outside is one of the healthiest choices you can make. It's just an easy, healthy choice. If you can get outside, especially if you can go on a walk, better yet, a hike, maybe on uneven terrain. The reason I say uneven terrain is your brain has to think about where your feet are going. It can't go into automatic mode. It has to be engaged. If there's obstacles, or if if it's a trail and there's maybe a rock on the trail, or you know, the trail's uneven and it's turning or it's winding, even if you're in a park on grass, or maybe you're on sand on a beach or something like that, it's going to make your brain process more information every footstep. So that's
Yes.
one thing. Uneven terrain is your friend when it comes to the brain. And it's also healthy for your body because you're using different muscle groups when you're not just running in a straight line, for example. Trail running would be way better than normal running in terms of overall health for your muscles and joints, tendons, but it's also equally true for your brain. It just engages it at a higher level. And if you're out on a hike or a walk, use your eyes to not
Mm.
just go tunnel vision. You want to be the person who goes on that walk or hike or jog and comes back and can tell someone all sorts of details that they noticed and that they thought about. So look at things, pay attention to them visually, and process, ask yourself questions about those things, like what is that kind of tree? That's a cool tree. I wonder what its name is, or that dog was amazing, and that person did not seem happy. I wonder what's going on in their life, just thinking about what you see. And then if you can go with someone and engage in conversation while doing this, then now your auditory verbal processing is also engaged. So if people go for walks, hikes, or jogs where they're with someone else, if they can, and they engage in conversation, the more thought provoking, the better. But really, any conversation is good. And if they can be on uneven terrain and really visually pay attention, almost like a detective, on a walk or hike, you know, uh, and then that would really engage the brain in a really healthy way, and you probably end up enjoying it more anyways. And so I love activities that are natural, integrated into life activities that could be a healthy lifestyle choice, and a hobby that you end up enjoying, or an activity that um, could be a lifetime thing for you. Um, there's all sorts of other activities, of course. I love pickleball, if you've heard of pickleball out there in India. But any racket sports are great. Basketball's great. Um, there's so many things, but some people are into photography. Well, go on your walk or hike and look for that perfect picture, see things through the lens of what kind of pictures you want to take. Or maybe you're bird watching,
Yeah.
um, um,
Start using.
yes, yes, connect it to a hobby, but get yourself outside and be active and moving. Those are the kinds of things that I would recommend.
That is so, so good. Really, really some good ones you shared, Nate. Really, it kind of, urged that, nudged me to plan for uh, a hike or maybe a walk, just looking at birds or nature, because I love doing that. And my father always, advises me to do that instead of just looking at my phone or taking selfies. So
Yes.
really, some great ones. And of course, once again, for all of our listeners, Nate, if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Go to our website, ncxbrainrecovery.com, and you can find a phone number on there. And you can even schedule an online appointment without talking to anyone if you prefer that. But you could just schedule a time to talk with us, and It's free, so I tell people, why not? Why not just call in? We'll give you all sorts of advice if you're not at the point where you could actually come get treated, or if it's not a good fit for you. Um, but then we know there's going to be some that it is a good fit for, and we're super happy to help people who have been struggling for months or years to recover and get the quality of life back. So
Definitely. I'll make sure to have the links and details in the show notes for our listeners. And Nate, thank you. Thank you so much for not only shedding light and bringing awareness on the hidden struggles of post concussion syndrome, but also offering hope, real world solutions, and of course, helping us understand and, to take care of our beautiful brain. So, thank you.
yes, thank you.
And to all of my mindful listeners out there, whether you have faced a concussion or you're supporting someone who has, or you just want to take better care of your beautiful brain, healing and growth are always possible. And Nate is helping us with those solutions out there. So just refer to the show notes and stay mindful, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next episode of The Mindful Living with your host, Sana. Take care, everyone. Thank you.